Hello again, everybody. My name is Mike Ridgway, and we are excited to have another session of Community Corner, the show where real estate professionals help other real estate professionals and also educate consumers. In previous shows, we have spoken to a lot of residential real estate agents. I'm really excited about our guest today because he's in a world that is a little bit residential, but really also commercial, and doing a lot of condo conversions and other things in the district. I'd like to welcome Chris Burns of Burns & Noble. He's also with TTR Sotheby's. So, Chris, welcome. So happy to have you here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
You know, you have a really exciting background and journey into real estate, not in addition to being through real estate.
Sure.
Share a little bit about how you got into real estate. And your background.
It was kind of like I kind of fell into real estate, and then fortunately, I quickly learned that I loved it. So I used to be, you know, at the time in the 2000s, I got out of college. You know, I took a couple odd jobs. Market wasn't great, but at the same time, I was pursuing a career in DJing and music production, and I was doing that full time pretty much all the way through 2014. But it didn't really necessarily pay the bills. And I was working for a friend, Benoit Haber, who's still a great client and friend of mine, who at that time was, you know, assembling a small portfolio of small apartment buildings in Petworth and other, I would say, up-and-coming areas in D.C. So I helped him kind of with his books a little bit, did some paperwork for him, and it got to the point where one day he was like, you know, I really don't like my real estate agent that much. You should go get your license and work for me. And so with it, and this is like, you know, he loves to tell the stories as well, but with a $1,500 loan to get me started and get my license and get me some business cards and get going, I went and got my license. You know, that back then you had to do it in person in the Long and Foster basement on Wisconsin Avenue that had no windows, so I didn't see sunlight for 2 weeks. But, you know, I got my license. It took me 9 months to get my first deal done. So I got my license in September 2012. And I got my first deal done, I think, in May 2013. And then it was off to the races. My introduction to real estate was a little different than most, I'd say, agents. So, you know, working for Benoit, he was concentrated on, you know, transacting these apartment buildings. So I quickly got immersed in the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act process, TOPA, and kind of learned the ins and outs of development, small multifamily. And I was doing residential transactions as well for friends and family in my sphere. But this was, you know, I was kind of living two separate real estate lives at that time and kind of just, you know, drinking from the fire hose, so to speak.
And so share a little bit more about your journey to what you're doing now, what you're focusing on in your business, and how that's a little bit different from retail real estate.
Sure. So we still do a lot of retail real estate, but you know, the core of our business is finding value and opportunities for developers and investors. And there's a variety of ways we do that, a variety of different marketing channels, strategies, relationships, networks that we use to bring in those deals. But you know, early on in my career, as I kind of was touching on, I became kind of obsessive with learning zoning, learning development, learning construction, to a certain point. Construction, how to model deals, how to model opportunities, how to project potential pricing, and then taking that knowledge, applying it, and then being able to quickly hash or model back of the envelope if opportunities I was finding was making sense. So I was able to provide a lot of value and build quite a decent book of business of investor and developer clients, because they would listen to what I say, right? Because I could find a deal, I could do back of the envelope calculations on it, and then present it with that information, and it would help them quickly get to a yes or no decision. And that created feedback loops where I would continually learn and hone my processes. And now I'm to the point where, you know, I do some projects on myself. I do some projects myself, but we're able to kind of work with a really good, experienced core group of developers who do condo conversions and brand new single-family homes and single-family renovations.
So as you're developing this expertise and learning that expertise,
mm-hmm.
how were you finding your clients who wanted to do this? Was it through your first client, or were people coming to you? How did you get your name and your reputation out
Well,
there?
so I had Benoit was my first client, but when you start looking at these opportunities, you start looking at the comps, and then you start looking to see who who built those comps, and then you start picking, and then it's simple as just picking up the phone and saying, hey, I may have an opportunity. And one thing I learned early on in my career was like, or maybe it took a couple of years, maybe not very early on in my career, but as long real estate development is very funny in that if you have something of value to provide, even a very big established developer, they're going to listen to you, and they're going to want to work with you. Right? It's not like you have to build this long relationship and do all these transactions or work so many years and establish a reputation. I think, like, especially at the higher end in retail residential real estate, you can hit the ground running as long as you're ready to like beat the streets, make some calls, and just like and basically turn over some rocks and find deals.
So you shared your expertise. How do you approach these prospects in terms of do you ask from just a conversation, or do you have a lead that you're presenting them, or are you coming with a plan for them, or is it a little bit of combination of everything?
I think it's kind of like that. You kind of laid out the roadmap of how we approach these situations. I mean, there's always a problem to solve. I mean, we are looking for distress. The opportunities are typically distress situations in one way or another. I mean, the 3 Ds: death, debt, and divorce, typically, right? But in DC, I can also add another layer, which is the T, tenancy. So there's typically, if landlords would reach out to us, and say, hey, look, I've got this situation. I've got these tenants who won't cooperate. As well as developers and other professionals or clients that would have, they would find the deals themselves and put them under contract. So, for tenant situations, we would come in and kind of broker those situations between not only the buyer and seller on one side, but also the tenants on another. So it's really about listening and figuring out what somebody wants and needs and how you can create a solution. So we're really it's not even about the real estate deal. It's about creating the solution for their given situation, where real estate is almost a tangential, like, kind of after effect.
So in a normal deal, you have a buyer and a seller. So what you're saying is when the tenancy issue, based on the laws in the district,
Right.
come into play, you have sort of this triangular communication process that you have to solve 3 problems and not just 2.
Sure. So, like, from the start, not only one do you have to negotiate depending on which side you're on, but you have to negotiate the contract price. But the contract price typically is irrelevant until you talk to the tenants and you see what the tenants are willing to take, especially in development opportunities where the highest and best use of the property is to be redeveloped, right? Now, if tenants are, a lot of situations, tenants have all the leverage. If tenants don't want to take a buyout, you can't really do much about it, right? And so, but you never know what people's situations are until you start talking to them with compassion and trying to understand their situation and just give them opportunities to make decisions for themselves. You can't force anyone to do anything they're not going to want to do, but you have to just provide a roadmap and a picture of, this is the situation, this is how you may benefit from it, this is how you may not benefit from it, and you let them make their own decisions.
So the TOPA laws, Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act in D.C., it was modified a couple of years ago, so it made it easier for the single unit type situation
Sure.
to be sold. But how has it affected, if it has affected, the work that you do with maybe some buildings that are more tenanted, have more tenants? Has it affected your business at all, one way or the other?
Yeah, I was very active. I'm still active, but we were much more active in years past when the single family exemption did not exist. We're not seeing as many transactions with the rise in interest rates, over the last year. The condo market, quite frankly, has softened. So some of these, 2 to 4 unit buildings that were being redeveloped are not as lucrative anymore. And lastly, there was, in conjunction with the single-family exemption, the change of the zoning change in 2016 from R4 to RF1, which I think covers about 25% of the city, row house type stock. You used to be able to quite easily develop those into multiple units if you had the lot sizes. Well, they got rid of that. They put some more burdensome requirements that you have to go through the Board of Zoning adjustments. Board of Zoning Appeals to get them. Anyways, what I'm getting at is that it became harder to find those. There became less and less opportunities because it became, the ability to develop has become more restrictive.
You mentioned that the condo market has softened a little bit because of the interest rates. Are there other factors that are causing that across the city, or is it just the interest rates?
I think
are there more regulations that people are looking at that your developers have to deal with and you have to deal with?
It's always a moving target. It feels like with some of the regulatory processes in DC. I'm not going to point any fingers because I do have permits in for a couple, but through a couple of them. But I think it's the condo market has softened since the pandemic. Obviously there's been a little bit more of a demand and a flight to the suburbs, and I also think that the crime, quite frankly, has put a lot of buyers who would otherwise be buying these types of condos on the sidelines, or they're looking elsewhere. I think that's going to turn around. I think the city will get things under control. I think if interest rates do come down, as they probably should in the next couple of years, I think it'll turn. I mean, we're going through a cycle just like anything else in real estate.
Yeah. Going back to the TOPA conversation a little bit, how do you navigate that? Because I know there's attorneys that are out there that are assisting tenants. Sometimes they get in the middle of a transaction to benefit themselves as more maybe than the tenants. But how do you navigate those waters?
Become friends with everybody.
Oh yeah.
I mean, really. I mean, it's just about having. I mean, there's a few attorneys who, it felt a little adverse, or the tone, and I would try to reach out and go out to lunch, tell them what you're up to, tell them what establish trust, and we've done quite a few deals, just having that trust, right? I think, look, the attorneys are in the same business. Everybody is trying to just transact real estate. There's just different ways it's kind of presented or shaped, right? But at the end of the day, a lot of these buildings that are being transacted, they're out of code. You've got situations that are, where tenants they may want to stay, they may not want to stay, and it's actually beneficial, I find, when tenants have representation, right? Because they have somebody who can counsel them through the process and speak on their behalf, and it's a lot easier than, say, if they don't have tenants, the attorneys. And I think it's, but as long as everyone is you can establish trust amongst all the parties, you have a higher likelihood of getting through these situations, because I think that people clam up when it comes to TOPA, and I think that comes into all sides. Sellers get aggressive, tenants can go dark or completely silent instead of being communicative. Buyers sometimes can get overly aggressive because they want the deal to happen, and they can instead of being compassionate, can be a little bit forceful in a way that they shouldn't be, because they don't really control the deal. The tenants control the deal. I think everyone forgets tenants control the deal pretty much for the first half of the tenants really do control the deal, not only for I'd say for the first 90 days, depending on the category, or even longer if it's a larger building, but they really control the outcome. I mean, for the seller and the buyer. And I think everyone kind of forgets that.
You mentioned trust and being collaborative. I did most of my practice when I was on the streets, from Montgomery County, looking into the district and seeing TOPA as a very adversarial process. That's how I think most people looked at it back then. But as Kevin Bailey, who you work with in our DC office, he's gotten to know some of the TOPA attorneys, and it is that basis of trust that he's been able to understand, help put deals together with the TOPA attorney. It's just having great communication and figuring out what's best for everyone. Is there a way to do that for everybody?
That's ultimately, at the end of the day, all it has to be about.
Yeah, great. So You mentioned the back of the envelope, and as we were talking and getting ready for our show here today, you were sharing how you can be very creative in looking at deals, and share with us a little bit about how you go, your approach about how you put deals together, and how you've been successful in that in your work there.
One, I think it's all about solving the problem. It's all about what is the seller, what is the seller's motivation, right? And then once you can get their motivation, typically they can pick two of the three: speed, convenience, or price, right? And I during the pandemic, before interest rates went crazy, I started getting obsessed with how to structure creative financing solutions, which is something I think that's kind of old school. Seller taking notes back, buying things subject to the mortgages, wrap mortgages, all these kinds of things that were more common in the 70s, 80s, again, during high inflationary periods, right? And then, I was very fortunate to kind of ride that those tailwinds when we did go into a high interest environment. So, when I'm putting deals together, one, I'm looking at them traditionally. All right, will the seller just take cash? And, does it make sense? But a lot of times, what they want won't make sense. I'll give you an example. For example, there's a land deal we're doing off of Georgia Avenue right now. The seller had a row house that on a good day would be worth maybe $600,000. However, it was sitting on a large piece of land that we knew that we could rezone, and he wanted about twice that. I said, okay, well, I can't go to a bank. I can't go to any private lender who's going to give me that kind of money because it won't appraise. But I know it will appraise when we rezone it. So will you take a note back? And that was the first one I did using that terms. And I've done a few others since then. I try to pitch these to my developers. They're typically skittish of doing the creative solutions and taking note backs and things. But it's one way I've kind of personally pursued. I think more people are coming around to it as the banks have tighten up, and rates unfortunately persist to be high.
You mentioned that you've done a lot. You've studied a lot and learned new elements of business, of real estate that have helped you. It seems like you are really process driven in your approach. Can you share with the real estate professionals out there what you have found has worked for you, and some of the metrics maybe that you look at, or how do you establish your metrics?
Hiring a great COO to basically shadow you and then put everything into a system. I mean, that's what I did. There was a young woman named Monique Bailey who was with us just until this August because she had a baby recently. But I think you get to a certain point where you get so busy that you can't do everything. And I think it's really important for someone it's very valuable to hire someone who is systems and process oriented and driven, to come in and create something that works for you. Right. For us, we have SOPs for everything. So I have a great support staff of Spencer Hodgson and Yazin, who kind of boots on the ground and operations, and we all three collaborate very tightly within a system that has been kind of laid out by Monique, right, with systems and process for everything. And I think you just have to, if you're going to do something more than once ever, you got to memorialize it, you got to standardize it, and you have to you'll keep making refinements with it. But I think as long as you stick to rules with how you operate, not only with the kind of clients you take, with how you do transactions, with how you negotiate, with how you do your marketing, things become much easier and you can scale very quickly and relatively inexpensively.
I always ask people this question because it seems like people always have come to real estate from another career, or another life experience that's helped them along the way. Going back to your DJ and your music years, are there any life lessons you took from that, or principles of how you did that business that have translated over to?
Yeah, I mean, so I was we were throwing parties in warehouses and weird, social clubs and all sorts of weird spaces, and I think I always was kind of I always had an eye out for opportunity, right? Especially when it came to real estate. I mean, we were looking for unique spaces we could rent out and throw parties and back then we could get money from Red Bull or Scion cars when they still were in business, and Pabst Blue Ribbon. I think Colt 45 gave us some money one time. So we could. There was, we were always looking for places we could do, like kind of creative events, right? And I think I kind of started getting an eye towards real estate back then, when I'd be like, oh, what's going on with that empty loft or upper floor of that, kind of space there? And I think that kind of carried over. But I think it was just like, I think I'm a very obsessive person, and I think the obsession that I still have over music and my obsessive personality kind of carried over into real estate and just wanting to learn everything I could about it.
That's so you knew that you were looking. This was definitely something that had your interest.
It definitely had my. I mean, what do you say? Like, if I knew, I wish I knew. Then what I know now. There's the whole song, right? Yeah. But I mean, you could see what was happening in the 2000s, right? I moved back to DC in 2006. You could see what was happening, even when like there was a housing downturn. Things, from what I could tell, weren't doing that work. So I was like tangentially like aware of it. But I think, I was really focused on something else. But, it was clearly like this was fate. This was destiny.
Yeah, that's great. What do you do to get your mind off of real estate and business?
That's hard. That's hard. But I play a lot of tennis. I play competitively. I play in a league in DC. Train with a coach a few days a week. I really love it. I picked it up 5 years when I met my wife, who's a pretty good player. She claims to be better than me, but I don't know about that. I play a lot of tennis. Obviously, I got three young girls. That takes a lot of time. It's fun playing with them.
Do they play tennis at all? Are they old enough?
No, they're not old enough yet. Yeah, we're trying to orient them. I don't know which one is going to take it up, but we'll see. What do I do? I love entertaining clients. I'm a Commanders season ticket fan. I'm a lifelong fan. I'm an obsessive fan to a certain extent, and love taking clients out to the games when in the fall and the winter.
Well, hopefully for all of us, there's sunnier days ahead with them.
I hope so. Yeah.
But going back to the tennis, are there because I love playing sports and played through college, and I always found that there were so many life lessons that things that have helped, principles and disciplines that I had learned that help me in today's in my business today, whether it's my work or mentoring somebody.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you've seen from your efforts at tennis that have translated over to your work world?
Trying to stay as calm as possible, which is hard.
Yeah.
This is hard. Keeping your eye on the ball, following through, keeping your eye on the ball, which I think it's a little bit of a metaphor, but it's really, that's how you make your shots. Being a good sport. I think, what else? I don't know. It's hard because like in the moment I'll be like, there's certain kind of strokes or strategies you're undertaking. And you kind of like, I'll take in between points. I'll be like, oh, that's kind of like this or kind of like that. And I think it kind of helps my brain process ongoing situations or questions or problems I have to solve. And besides, also, I mean, it does clear my mind. But in the middle of things, like when I come across a situation, I will come up with solutions to my business while I'm also playing. I don't know how to describe it.
I understand that.
Yeah,
I understand that as well.
I think it's a way to kind of take yourself away from the business, learn some lessons while you're playing in a no. I mean, I'm not playing professionally, right? There's no. I mean, you put pressure on yourself because you want to be your best, but in effectively a no pressure environment. And then from stepping away and learning those lessons there and then flipping them back into your business.
We're a lot alike because my daydreaming is thinking about, okay, let me go back to think about something in the office.
Right, sure.
So I understand how it translates for you. What are your goals? What do you want to do in the next couple of years? Have you given that any thought?
Yeah, I want to keep just seeing how far I can push this and take this. I want to, I'd like to keep building the single family side of our business. We've kind of jumped into that about 3 years ago. I really like it. Would love to connect and with other builders to implement our pre-sale program we've kind of developed, which has been very effective. over the last year and a half, 2 years that we kind of created it and continue to refine it. I'd love to pick up more deals here locally. I just would love to just keep growing the business, and keep. So I don't know. Everything is a different problem to solve. I just love to solve more problems.
Let's go back to the thing that you're talking about as a goal to expand the pre-build. What do you call it? The pre-build.
We call it like a pre-sale program. Well, I don't know, pre-sale or pre-completion program.
Okay. Share a little bit about that with us.
Yeah. So what we like to do is engage builder clients, and a lot of these deals we're putting together ourselves for, from start to finish. We identify the opportunity, we place the opportunity, we counsel the builder through the process, finishes, designs, floor plans, etc. And then what we like to do is, right as construction is starting, or even before the shovel's in the ground, we will put together a very comprehensive package with renderings, floor plans, specifications, finishes, inspirations, renderings based on the floor plans. And it's a really kind of robust marketing piece that we can then take to market and try to land a buyer, the end buyer, before the project is finished. Construction costs have gone up considerably, right? And living in this area, people have very busy careers where they don't necessarily have time to engage a builder, identify a lot, work with an architect, hire a general contractor, and so on and so forth. So there's an arbitrage opportunity for these buyers to come in, put their spin on, picking some finish selections, making some non-standard upgrades. Maybe even early on in the process, you could make some structural changes. But a lot of times you can just maybe move walls or open up a wall or frame up something for an office. Anyways, they can buy the house, work with the developer, make some small customizations, make it their own, but not have to go through that process. And actually the cost, if they were to try to do a custom home from scratch or from ground zero.
And have you had how's that been received in the market?
It's been great. I mean, we've done it a few times over the last year. And it's made our developers happy and helped them sleep a little bit better at night, knowing that they've got somebody with a non-refundable deposit in hand. But it's also been great because buyers think they're getting buyers are getting a little bit more than they would if they were to buy what would be a spec house, just thrown on the market, where you can't maybe they don't like black or chrome finishes. They want something else or a little bit more elevated than they would at that price point. And they're willing to pay for it or pick their tile or whatever. I mean, we've had a lot of happy kind of clients, both on the buyer side and also the developer side, go through this program. We're now doing it for renovated houses, we've refined the process, refined how we're having these conversations. We do definitely follow kind of a schedule and a process when, what's very interesting about this situation is when a buyer is interested, we want to get their agent and the buyer on a Zoom with the builder because there is a relationship that's being established here and we want to make sure everyone's a good fit. So, it's a great system we've kind of very quickly kind of built out over the last year and a half for over several properties and we'll continue to improve it.
And obviously you're building a relationship, which is so important because they're interacting and making decisions in the end collectively.
Sure.
Besides, what's the real value to the builder to engage someone in that, a buyer in that, find that buyer and engage them in that process?
I think there's a premium. Builders can charge a premium if they're going to allow for customizations, and it's locking someone in. It's locking, especially if they've got a contract on the property and they want to go buy another one or start it. They can say, hey, they can go to their bank, presumably a community local bank who funds their deals or a private money lender, and say, hey, look, I've got this one under contract. Can you lend me some more money? And not feel like the banks, especially with the banks tightening their lending positions, right? Like, they're not necessarily, I don't know how extensive their credit lines could be, but having a contract in place is going to help them take on other opportunities with a little bit more peace of mind.
Wow. So would you say that is a large part of your business, a growing part of your business?
It's a growing part of our business. It's something that's really kind of spun out of the condo conversions. I mean, it's really it's very similar but different. But it's really satisfying because you get to know these buyers, and it's it's definitely a feel good, a feel good situation at the end.
And I'm sure every builder could benefit from that program or that process. That
Yeah, sure. I mean, I see agents. Listen, it's not. We're not reinventing the wheel here. There's a lot of great agents that I think have done limited versions of this. I think just what we're doing is taking it a step further and really providing a better picture of what the buyer is potentially buying.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for coming by today. Really appreciate it. It's really exciting to hear, what you're doing in the district and around the district. And I think there's a lot of people that could learn a lot, both consumers and real estate professionals. And good luck with you with your continued growth and success.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Mike.
Absolutely.
Be well.
Thank you.